Okay, we did it.
Good one. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ramsey County Board Workshop. Today's workshop topic is the 2025 transportation funding. Courtesy reminder that this workshop is recorded and is live streamed on Zoom webinar. There will be no votes taken during this workshop. But before we get into the presentation, let's go around and make sure everyone has a chance to introduce themselves. We'll start here. I'll go first. And Garrison McMurtry, Commissioner, District 3.
Ramsey County Commissioner, Mike Chong, District 6.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Tara Jevin Singh, Commissioner, District 1.
Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner, District 2.
Rena Moran, Commissioner, District 4.
Lynn Becker, County Manager.
Carrie Collins, Deputy County Manager, Economic Growth and Community Investment.
Brian Isaacson, Public Works.
Mike Rogers, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Kelly Miller, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Yes, Kelly Miller, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 7, sorry.
And then we'll start back room as well. Jason, we'll start with you.
Jason Gang, Chief Clerk.
Ethan Julie, Deputy Director of Communications and Communication.
Jen Hammer, Senior Policy Analyst.
Brad Schultz, County Engineer.
Jennifer Jordan, Public Works.
John Masatello, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Consultant Transportation Pilot.
Greg Bond, TC as well.
Jordan Cruz, EDCI Finance and Accounting.
I'm Verity, Active Living Ramsey Community, a project of Ramsey County and Public Works. Eden Haig, Engineer Public Works.
Matt Hill, Commissioner Mercury's office. Chris Barrett, Ramsey County. Kevin Ryan, Senior Transportation Plan and Public Works.
And very you're good. Wonderful. Awesome. Well, before we get started, I just want to level set the conversation. Then I'll hand it over to Deputy County Manager Collins, and we'll get going there. So the County Board held its initial transportation funding workshop in November of last year to discuss the possible reallocation of Riverview corridor funds. Public Works staff presented on the funding sources, allowed uses, and possible projects the funding would be utilized on. On December 17th, 2024, the County Board took two actions related to the funding. First was to allocate up to $6 million to the 2025 Union Depot operational budget for capital maintenance costs for near-term improvements. And the second was to direct Public Works staff to develop a detailed transit and transportation investment plan based upon the reallocation of the Riverview corridor funds consistent with the investment categories presented at the November board workshop. So county staff is here today to present on how the reallocated funding would supplement current funding, how projects will be selected, investment categories, as well as next steps should the board decide to pursue reallocation of Riverview corridor funds. And with that, I will turn it over to Deputy County Manager Collins.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. We've got a robust slide deck, and although we've had conversations with you all, so you kind of know the high level summary, we're interested in your feedback and discussion today as we talk about, we'll call it the investment profile associated with not just the kind of reallocation of Riverview funds, but of other funding sources as well. And so this information, however, can be complex as we're talking about layered funding strategies here. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. With that, I'll turn it over to Director Isaacson.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for having us. It's been quite a journey. And being in Public Works, we don't use the term exciting often. But I would characterize this as one that really merits that. I think that this is a real opportunity for us as an organization to really move a lot of needles when it comes to how we serve our residents with the transportation system. I want to express our profound gratitude at the board for the continued support and not only the work that we do, but the thinking that's going into this and what it will mean for for us in terms of our work. So today, we've talked about at a high level allocating the transit funds to a number of things. Today, we're going to move that farther in terms of more detail. We'll talk to you about the transportation plan and how that frames things for us. We'll talk about the range of funding sources and what we're focused on. We'll get into the details of what we're proposing in terms of categories and some funding levels for the different categories. And probably the most important thing is using this forum to tee up a number of next steps that will be board actions, which will formalize what we're anticipating will be the allocation of these funds to a variety of investments. I think we've already gone into this some, but I'll just say, you know, we had a good conversation in November. I think that there was general support for us to move forward and understand better what we can do with this. And so we're coming back to you with more detail, more information. We thought today we'd frame Public Works in a few key documents and try to differentiate between them. Historically, we would come in front of the board for a workshop to talk about our TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, which was a 5-year program of projects, very detailed, project by project, a lot of numbers, some maps. So we talked to you about the things we've done last year, the things we're going to do next year. We're not going to do that today. That's going to be towards the end of this process. And you'll see that as we move forward, the transportation plan frames things. We'll formalize what we're calling this transit and transportation investment plan. And then that tip will be that last piece of what are those priority things that we're going to show up first in our program. What are those projects going to look like? So about a year and a half ago, we embarked on a process to have the county's first transportation plan. Transportation plans generally are things that talk about vision. They talk about what is the system going to look like in 25 years? How do we think about characterizing investments over that long period? What types of things are we trying to do with our transportation system? And I think most importantly for us, establishing a set of criteria that mirrors the board's perspectives and policies, and using that as a framework for how we implement with each successive transportation improvement program.
And then looking at this piece, this just helps us identify how do we get projects, not only through the TIP, but ultimately with all of this new revenue. How does it come forward? How does the 2050 All Abilities Plan play into it? And there's a number of different criteria. The plan itself really is focused on safety, multimodality, equity, and then maintaining the system. So it's a nice system out there that we don't have parts that are really falling apart. So it's a good overall system, and that's really what flows into those scoring metrics. And in the past, we'd spend a lot more time on the pavement score and making sure that that was a primary focus. It's still a focus, but it's not the sole focus. Coming out of the 2050 plan, it's really giving double weight to equity, safety, and the ped bike side of it, that multimodal piece, and then rolling all of those scores together with pavement to identify projects. That's the data piece of it that spits it into this transportation improvement program, where we take that data and then look at the staff side, the real world side of it, to say what really makes sense with those scoring metrics. What are some practical considerations we have out there? Have we been in this neighborhood for 3 straight years ripping up a road? Should we be in there for a 4th straight year? What other projects are cities doing in the area that we could combine with, so we can be flexible and move things around? So that's where that staff human side of it comes in to help us select projects.
And so before you move on, I think Rice Street is a crystallizing moment for me in that. So I started with the county in 2018. We started work on Rice Street in earnest in 2019. And part of that process, as part of the process of developing that project, we discovered that Rice Street was one of the worst crash rates in our system. It was multiple times higher than we would have expected for that type of facility. It affects populations that don't have the capacity to absorb that kind of impact. The system was in poor shape. And so in inquiring how we got there and how we started doing that work, I would have anticipated that those were the reasons, and they weren't. It was just serendipity that we ended up there. And so as a plan, as an investment process, it's good fortune that we're there because there are high needs there and there are folks that need our help. But as part of this process, we want to be able to say why we're where we are and why we're investing in those places with more certainty, with more transparency and clarity. And so that's one of the outcomes of this plan, is to be able to say, we created some criteria and some screening. So when we look at the entire system, and we look at where we're going to invest, we can say those types of things.
Commissioner Livingston?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, any one of us around this table have constituents who will raise concerns about their particular street, their particular neighborhood. And as they should, right? That's a great starting point. And I guess the question I have is, how are all of the communities assessed on a regular basis? Is it, you know, is it the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or is there like an ongoing, a measurement of different things? I mean, what is the process to getting to these scores throughout the county?
So it is something that we're gonna do with regularity. It is not intended to be the squeaky wheel gets the investment, and that's what we're trying to do. One of the great things that I value about Public Works is there's lots of data, right? There's lots of things that would tell us why we should be in a certain area, whether it's crash rates or pavement condition or number of pedestrians, or even, you know, our folks are looking at the intersections across our system, and they're assessing some level of risk of like, what are the things where we can anticipate that those are going to be crash problems in the future. And so the point of this process is to hang numbers on it so that we can have a way to explain, so that when someone says, well, I think mine is just as bad as Rice Street, we can put numbers around that and say, I feel where your concern is. However, here are the things that we look at, and we can quantify that your number 392 out of 430, and this one is number 4. And that's why we're there.
And will there be some kind of a dashboard so residents can look that up on their own and be able to see that so they can comprehend, you know, because they're only knowing their own corner of the county, right?
Sure.
So there is a dashboard. It's available to county staff because we want to be able to help people interpret the data that they see. So we're very open to having a resident come and ask us a question and then working through the data with them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jean?
I also, just for that piece, I was curious about it too, Commissioner Jevazing, and I looked at the 2050 All Abilities Plan. There are interactive maps that folks can zoom in for each type of metric as well. So thank you. Yeah, that's available.
Yep.
And also I just learned this yesterday, so I'll just share here that there's a public comment period open until the end of this month on that plan. So for my question, I would like to know more about what is like an equity score, what is the safety score, and what is like pedestrian bicycle score. Yeah, what goes into that score?
Yeah, so equity scores look at poverty, race, youth or elderly, so age. They look at disabilities, vehicle availability within a household, housing index. We also look at things like crash rate, pavement condition, bridges and population. So those are what tend to fall into all these scores. From a pedestrian bike, it looks at what systems out there today. Where are some gaps that could be improved by this? Like if you're looking at a road and there is no sidewalk or there is no trail, that's going to rate much higher for the need to get it filled in. It can also look at condition of that infrastructure as well to say, is it time that it gets improved? Because maybe it was built at a time standards were different and you're trying to improve that standard as well. So there's a lot of different data points that go into this. It isn't just a one-off thing and check the box for that's the score for that specific criteria.
And the would you go over the safety score? Which one is that?
Yeah, the safety score looks at crash rates and it looks at risk, like Brian was saying, because sometimes It doesn't show up in a crash rate, but whether you're talking to community members or you're talking internally, you know that it's a risk and it's just for whatever reason, we've had a lot of near misses, which is good that there haven't been crashes, but it's bad because it doesn't show up, so you want to try and get ahead of that. So that type of information shows up as well.
And are the crash rates, like car to car crash rates or like pedestrian car fatalities or?
It would be both.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great process. Thank you. I have similar questions as my colleagues, so thanks for asking those. I just want to just get a little better sense when you talk about meaningful and inclusive engagement, what that looks like, and will that be project-based or is it general overall? And I can imagine it's cost and time prohibitive to do project-based, because you have a lot of projects going on here. Engagement, inclusive and meaningful engagement is really, is takes time, and it taxes the community, and it's also taxes our budgets, you know, because you bring in all the interpreters, which is great. I mean, we do all the things you need to do. And I know that we just did it with the ADA transition plan, and that was great, because I know Connie Bernardi and Active Living did that. But so talk to me a little bit about this meaningful and inclusive engagement, where that's gonna happen, and like I said, is it project-based or will it be countywide based? Like, what do people think about when they think about what they want?
We need both.
Okay.
So as part of the transportation plan, we've done a whole range of
Yeah.
engagement activities at a system level.
Okay.
But all of that was also populated in every project we do. Well, I mean, that's not every project. There's a range of engagement levels. So if we're really just out there milling and overlaying, there's less engagement, but there's still engagement. Whereas the greater the impact of the project, the more engagement that we do. And so we're constantly hearing from the public, even in independent of projects. And so we're incorporating all of that as well as that system level engagement. So we're doing both. It's crucial to our work. In terms of making sure that we have ideas about the system, but certainly our residents have some expertise and some perspective, and so we work through those things at a project by project basis.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just, thank you. And I've been to a number of your community engagement meetings when you have projects going on in that neighborhood.
Mhm.
So that's important, that the neighbors get to weigh in on that specific project. And then is it, and I appreciate Commissioner Jean bringing up the end of this month being the public comment period for the all abilities plan. Is this when we should be driving our residents to comment on that whole plan if they have ideas? Is
Yes,
that
Commissioner,
they
so
should be
this is
doing?
the fourth round of engagement on the 2050 plan. The first three rounds were much more intensive, did the
Oh,
open
okay.
houses, the pop-ups. This is more or less a internet-based, here's the plan, please review it, providing the additional comments, we can then tweak it based on those. But it's the wind down of a
The wind down,
lot of
okay, so
engagement
that's
that has
good.
happened
That-
previously.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so, and that's it for this amount of money. There won't be any more sort of countywide engagement. It will be more on projects then. Is that what we're thinking? Or
Yes.
we may,
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I just to build upon that,
Yeah.
you know, I know, as you know, Commissioner McGuire, the various communities, particularly in suburban Ramsey County, do have the business council meetings, and oftentimes Public Works is invited to that ahead of a construction season to talk about, you know, here's what the season looks like ahead of, you know, the summer, if you will, to say, you know, these are the business impacts, here's what you might expect, and an opportunity for, well, you know, a quasi business focus group of sorts to ask those questions. Typically the city council, they do attend those meetings as, you know, niche in the mayor.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's opportunities to build upon just, not just kind of broad engagement, but municipal engagement, city partner engagement as well.
and I will say those meetings are really well attended because I go to them all and they're great. So
Yeah.
I love those meetings that you mentioned.
Two more questions, Commissioner Ortega and then Commissioner Moran.
No, I just want to add to that, you know, I've had a lot of road projects. In my first term, we did the Fort Bridge, we were redoing the Fort Bridge. Community engagement with Public Works was like one meeting to notify everybody. It was my rookie year, and the first thing I did was stop. We
Yeah.
stopped the whole bridge project.
Mhm.
And if I fast forward to 20 years later. And the type of community engagement Public Works has done. Project by project, and. It seems like it takes more time, but you come out with a better product. Community. Support and so forth. The last project we did, we've done Fort Parkway, we've done Randall. Major from the river all the way down to the highway, and that was a total reconstruction. But the last project, which was Lexington Avenue, from Randall to the river, we even reshaped the streets.
Mhm.
That process took, it seems like it took a couple of years. But I gotta tell you something, the community was part and parcel of all of those meetings. When we finally came to making the decision, it was all thumbs up by the community. Whether nobody got 100% of what they wanted, but I mean, the feedback I got from the community was, I've never seen anything like this, so I encourage you to keep that.
Absolutely.
It might seem like it takes more time and more cost, but at the end of the day, you get a better product, you got a community that feels like we got it, you know, these are our options, we gotta make decisions, and it works.
So, this is great, and, so you mentioned Rice Street,
Mhm.
and so I'd like to hear more of that thought process of, are you saying it is compatible for an investment or not? And, the scoring metric is really the foundation of what gets done or not. And since this is done at a really high level, and I know you gave us the language of what makes up an equity score and safety score, but can you like send that to us, the more details of what that is? So we can have, and then can you share with me what, to understand current social equity, what does that mean? To your left.
Okay,
Mhm.
yes.
What does that mean?
I'll let Mike speak to that, but at a high level, your question about Rice Street,
Mhm.
yeah, we are investing in that. And it was, I'm merely expressing it as a function of how we chose to be there as opposed to someplace else in the county system. And so it really does mirror the type of process that we want to move forward with, being able to say, here are the main reasons why we're in this corridor.
Mhm.
And that those reasons mirror the values of you all as our board.
So can you re-ask the
I'm just-
equity question? I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
So under the 2050 All Abilities Plan, you have understand the current social equity.
Yeah,
Yeah, what does that mean?
that is taking a look at what is it today for those characteristics I mentioned, like what's the poverty rate of that area? What's the racial identity, the racial makeup? Oh, what's the age distribution? Is it a lot of older people? Is it a lot of younger people? What type of disabilities, vehicle accessibility, all those play into it. To help us identify what the social equity of that specific area that project would go through.
And I'll just rest on one other of the criteria that we haven't really talked about it a lot, and that's one of the indexes that we use in this is about housing and transportation cost as an index.
Mhm.
And if you look around the county, it's really varied, and it's about what percentage of household income in that geography is spent on the combination of housing and transportation. And to some degree, it's about system, and some degree, it's about connectivity to other systems, like, do you have transit lines in that census block or not? And the more options that you have, the lower the cost of transportation in that area. So we're really trying to wrap our head around equity in a broad sense. So that when we invest in certain corridors, we're trying to raise that, to improve that condition.
Mhm. And I think that's a good investment right now with all the construction that's going on in the capital area.
Yeah.
This is inclusive of Rice Street.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
We talked a little bit about this, but so the map on the left is the county highway system. That's the focus of all the discussion we're having. That's our the focus for what we're investing in for the. When we talk about investment principles, it really is about making sure that we're preserving the system we have. There's a huge investment in that system. We want to make sure that it's in good condition. We're advocating to expand transit service and from a variety of perspectives, and whether that's improving, you'll see going forward, you'll see us investing in corridors with the intent of providing transit advantages so that we're improving that overall frequency. We're working with Met Transit to make sure that we see more high frequency corridors in Ramsey County going in more directions. Because we know that the population of Ramsey County goes lots of different places. And investing in that network is going to be crucial to the continued vitality of the county. We want to invest in a multimodal network to the degree that we're expanding those options, again, with that sense of the more options people have, the more ability they have to get to the things they need to get to in an economical way. We want to invest in the transportation system. One of my professors in college used to say that transportation agencies are the largest commercial developers in the world, because when you cross two transportation systems, that is a location that people can really take advantage of, and I believe in that. So the degree to which we can invest in our transportation system and support greater economic vitality, we're going to do that. And we're working closely with CED on various corridors and various areas of the county, and keeping in mind that economic competitiveness inclusion plan. And as the commissioners have referenced, another crucial component of this is investing in the depot. It's a hub for transportation. I think we've seen that with the success of Borealis, absent the recent hiccup, but with the success of Borealis, we've seen what that can do. We can see that that's a huge change in that system. And so investing in the vitality of the building, but also continuing to invest to get more people and more service into that hub is going to be important as well. So we referenced Public Works has a variety of funding sources, and I'll just kind of skip through a few of these. As we've talked about some, occasionally you'll hear people say, why are you investing in a bike lane? My gas taxes pay for your work, and et cetera, et cetera. And I can say that gas taxes are a portion of what we get, but they are not the predominant funding source. You see a variety of levies that the county exercises. Some of it is general levy, some of it is about regional rail. There are taxes that are about wheelage, which are vehicle based. City and state partner funds refers to every project. Most projects that we do, I think almost all projects have some share. And so if we look at, say, Rice Street as an example, the city of St. Paul has shares where their system intersects with ours, and we're doing work together. And the same is true when we do a project with MnDOT. MnDOT will have a share in those. And so those represent a portion of the revenues that we bring to bear to our work. Federal funds are a little bit more happenstance. We go after federal funds on a project by project basis. Typically, the federal funds that we employ come through the Met Council, through the TAB process. And so it's a competitive process. I think in our this last tip that you would have seen, we were in the neighborhood of $25 million in federal funds out of a couple $100 million of overall investment. And so it's supplemental. It's not a prominent source of funding, but on any given project, it could be substantial.
Quick question on that front. With the requests, the federal requests that's come through, have these been for just one large project at any given time, or have they been for multiple projects that we've had these federal requests for?
I'm going to say in our current tip, there's probably 8 projects that have some variation of federal funds, and it varies. Some of them are smaller, like around $1 million. There are others that have around $10 million. And it varies on the program that it comes through, Met Council's TAB process. There are programs like HSIP, which tend to be in the $1 to $2 million range, which do more small scale projects. The project we have at 35 E and J is nominally around a $30 million project. 10 million of that is coming from the region for that interchange reconstruction.
Gotcha. Commissioner LeVar.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I definitely should know this, but I'm just gonna ask it to be reminded. You know, with the infrastructure dollars and ARPA, the dollars that were available in the past, did we access many of those, or would have been project by project basis? And I feel like it was just surprising when you just said we don't use many federal dollars, but I would have thought that we would have used a fair amount in some of the past programs, but
So we,
just remind me.
it's always been project by project.
yeah,
We never
okay.
get direct federal funds.
Yeah, okay, right.
So it's been a competitive process. I will say, going back 5-6 years, it was a larger proportion of our program because we've seen increases in revenues in the last 2 years. So federal funds would have been a larger share and probably more important for us. In terms of without the federal funds, we might not have been able
Yeah.
to do the project. So its importance in our program has changed.
Mhm. And those dollars are not as available now, right? Or are we still able to access some of, there's hopefully still some access to those dollars, project by project basis.
You know, we're
Yeah.
all watching the uncertainty in
Yeah.
the federal
Okay.
government and what it means. So far, to
Mhm.
my knowledge, all of the regional funds that come through Met Council, I've not seen those get paused. And so, you know, what we're expecting is that's gonna continue, because most of it is really the meat and potatoes of projects. It's not the types of things that the federal government has been making noise about that they don't want to see us investing in. So the lion's share of that work will continue, and I think it's gonna continue to be as accessible to us as it was,
Mhm.
as it has been. And we'll continue to go after it on a project by project basis.
But it implies a thoughtfulness in the federal government that I wasn't sure about. So.
Yeah, I'm probably editorializing some. I
Yeah,
think
okay.
there are some indications that they're less thoughtful than I'm giving them
Yeah,
credit for, but I think
right. I didn't
there are
know
other
they were being
indications
so
that
thoughtful. Yeah,
they're not going after some of those things.
thank you.
Commissioner Jennison.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the questions I have is, given that so many of these projects are in collaboration with our partners and different things like that, it seems as if there's been a thoughtful way of minimizing our reliance on federal dollars for many of our projects, but our other partners are other intergovernmental partners, should that impact their ability to access those funds, how will that braid together with the funding? Will that compromise our ability, even though we may have found other ways to fund our part of the project? How will that impact their part of funding joint projects?
That's an interesting question. So I think the cities have a higher degree of importance in desiring federal funds. There are projects by which the cities probably wouldn't be able to do them without federal funds. That being said, there are a number of projects because the council's solicitation process is competitive. And I will say, at any given time, if Met Council is distributing $125 million of federal funds on an annual basis, they probably are solicited by a factor of 2 or more, depending on the program, for the available federal funds. And so it is highly competitive. And so there are examples of projects where we've been working with a local partner, with a city, and we would have said a few years back, this is not something that we're going to fund independently. We're going to have to hope that we'll get federal funds. I think in this case, those projects were not likely to get federal funds. And so the allocation of some of these funds would help us to help them more than we would have been able to. Does that make sense?
And also the idea of, and how much can the county fill the gap, I guess, is something for us to consider going forward and prioritizing projects.
For sure. Yeah, and that'll be, you know, there are, as you'll see, you know, even in the stuff that we're presenting to you today, we're going beyond the actual dollar figure that we know we have, because there are needs that are greater than the revenues that we have, even with this substantial increase. Okay. You want- yeah. So this just gives you a sense of the proportion of funds. I mentioned that gas tax is not the predominant source for us. You'll see a lot of different sources that here. Sales tax is probably the greatest number. Transportation advancement account refers to the 2023 legislation, which increased our funding based on the 3/4 cent regional sales tax. County sales tax is a tax that's been levied by the county for transit. Regional Rail Authority levy has been levied by the county for transit, and so this pie chart presumes that we're going to allocate those funds to the broader public works portfolio, and those would be the dominant share of our program. So this just gives you a sense of the proportionality of the different funding sources.
What's the transportation advancement account?
So transportation advancement account refers to the 3/4 cent regional sales tax and passed in 2023. The lion's share of that funding goes to Met Transit. There's a chunk of that money that goes to the counties, the metro counties. And that all goes into this transportation advancement account. And just for reference, we talked about this in the November board workshop, that the transportation advancement account has very specific things by legislation that we can spend those funds on. So just as a point of reference, if you're ever wondering if any of these revenue streams have limitations, they pretty much all do. And so part of the magic that is Public Works and the folks behind me is making all of those different pieces fit in terms of what we can spend money on and how we fund the different elements of projects.
So thank you. So the county sales tax is dedicated to transit, or no, it's transportation? I forget. County
It
sales
is the
tax.
local option sales tax, so it goes back to 2017.
Okay.
And that was that 1/2 cent sales tax that
Mhm.
Ramsey County dedicated to transit
Oh, okay.
and some things that were in the tip and all abilities.
Oh, okay. So.
By
I think it
statute, the
was-
county board had to take a resolution to
Okay.
say it's gonna go to these things, so the lion's share of the work for local option sales tax was transit.
was transit, but it's not required. It's whatever we decide,
Yes.
whatever we decide we want to do by board resolution.
Right.
For transit or
For
transportation.
Transportation,
For
right, that's what
transportation,
I'm,
yeah.
so, bike ped.
Yep.
Transportation and transit, okay. Thank you.
All right, so into the proposed program, and this gets kind of at Commissioner, your question about what happened in 2017 and where are we at now? And back in 2017 with the approval of the board, it really went to 3 major transitway projects. That's where the sales tax funding went. It went and to then operate Green Line as well. That's where it used up the money. That's where it all went. And then we used the other funds, not the sales tax or the rail authority funds. We used the other funds to essentially preserve the system as it is today with some minor improvements to multimodal elements because of the limitation. With this funding being able to come into Public Works to go transportation countywide, it opens up a bunch of new ways to improve the system as a whole. It allows us to do more targeted investments to transit along more corridors. So again, not focused on those specific large transitways, but countywide. And then it allows us to push more multimodal improvements and better overall system conditions, not just from a pavement standpoint when we think about system conditions, but from a safety standpoint as well. This is just a kind of a step back of, okay, we had all of those transitways. Where are they really at right now? What's happened? Well, good news is Green Line's still operating. Better news, Gold Line just opened in March, so that's a great thing. We've had some ebbs and flows with Purple, but I think we're in a decent spot working with our corridor cities and with Metro Transit to figure out a path forward for better transit on that corridor. So that's one there. And then we have Riverview, which you all know. The county last year stepped away from Riverview as a project that the county would be leading and funding. It's now in St. Paul's Court, as well as some of their partners, to propose a new concept, which they're out to the public with. County is not involved in funding anything related to the new Riverview that the city is working on, but don't be surprised if the city comes to us. and says, please, would you fund a piece of this project? And if the board were to decide to do that, they would have to obviously see what specific scope items they are interested in. And that would require reallocating some of the funding out of the categories that we have to be able to backfill, because there is not a set aside in any of this program going forward for Riverview. So a number of the principles that we worked upon when trying to figure out what types of categories should we develop for this funding is we want to be consistent with the all abilities transportation policy that the county has. That's the PED, bike, transit, and then automobiles prioritization, but also look at that within the context of what's going on in the real world around us, because we all know that not every street's a local street, not every street's a freeway, they all perform different functions. So we need to make sure that we're cognizant of that, as well as the neighborhood context. We want to look at how to be better at growing economic competitiveness. How do we make sure we make those transportation connections between housing, jobs, essential services, community amenities? That's where the trips are now. It's not just about home to work. It's about connecting all of the different types of trips throughout the day. And that's a change on the transit side in particular. Obviously, the roadway network has been able to provide that, and by increasing multimodal transportation options within neighborhoods and throughout the county, that allows different types of trips to happen as well. So you don't feel like you are 100% reliant on that car. So again, that's the final piece, is increasing access through multimodality and reducing barriers.
So before you move on, Mike,
Yeah.
I want to emphasize, so if you think about where Gold Line is and where Purple Line is, and then where Riverview has been historically, that's a very small geography in the county. And by taking these funds and allocating them across the county, that changes the nature of what we can do for a lot more of the county, a lot more people, and really starts to broaden the scope of what we can do with the transportation system. So I just can't emphasize enough that that countywide perspective can be profound.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just want to say thank you for incorporating the board's feedback last time from the last workshop, where we really emphasized about our all abilities plan, as well as making our communities more connected. And that's connecting to jobs, to housing, community services, to our hospitals, our schools, and also emphasizing and supporting growth in transit services. And that was really important, and I feel like it's very reflected here in our principles here.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Another set of principles, again, focusing on this 2050 is all abilities transportation plan that Brian briefly talked about. We spent a number of conversation minutes on how exactly things get scored, but that plan is the first one that we've done as a county that we are aware of. It's something that it's not going to be static. It will be updated on typically a 5-year cycle. So we'll have a 2055 all abilities transportation plan and a 2060. And that seems like so far away. And then it also looks at the existing construction program and how do we blend those together? You want to add?
I do, yeah. So I think when we start to talk about different corridors, there are some corridors where we've been working. I think we think about White Bear and Maryland. We've been doing a lot of work there for lots of reasons. Others, we're going to be starting from scratch. And so there's a range of years here. But if we think about Rice Street again, as an example, we started work on that initial design work and planning in 2019. We're starting construction here in 2025, and we will be constructing in 25, 26, and 27. And so I think that there are going to be corridors that some will take that much time. There are others that will be shorter, both from the construction end, but also from the design end.
Where does the community engagement play into the timeline? Is that something that works in tandem with all the different other components that you've added here, or is there a specific area where you want to really lean into the community engagement?
So it's probably at its greatest level of effort in that first phase of, because you're talking about different approaches to address problems, you're talking about what the problems are, you're talking about what community needs are relative to that facility. And so that's probably the greatest level of effort, but our folks are engaged with the community throughout the entire process. It's just that the nature of it changes. So initially, you're talking about what are we gonna do and how does everybody think about what those options are? Then as you're working through the design details, you're refining the ideas, and then during construction, we're talking about how are the impacts and are there things that we can do to tweak what we're doing in the field to try to minimize that impact.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just real quick on that, there will be other opportunities outside of the project by project to engage in the network. And so a couple of those include the next iteration of the economic competitiveness and inclusion plan. As we take a look at that and dream up what the next 5 to 10 years, want to look like, the connection between these other plans is going to be critical to transit-oriented development. And then also, as we stare down the next few years, we'll need to rethink the comprehensive plan. Ramsey County does have a comprehensive plan, much like municipalities do. And we'll need to submit that to the Metropolitan Council in a few years and update the network and update all of the data that goes into that plan, which is yet another opportunity for community to weigh in as well. So there's just going to be all sorts of avenues, pun intended, for public to engage.
Wow.
Collins, ladies and
That's
gentlemen.
right.
You're all we call. So,
That would have been.
yeah, all right.
You know you're on.
Yeah.
Commissioner Miranda.
So, University Avenue is a corridor from St. Paul to Maplewood. When you say when you say Rice Street, it's a stretch of a corridor. Where are we talking about doing the construction on Rice Street?
We're.
Is it like Rice in Washington? Rice in Larpenteur? Is it Rice in University?
So over the next 4 years, over the next 4 years, we're gonna be reconstructing everything from John Ireland Boulevard, which is on the southern end. And remind me of the northern terminus?
36. Oh.
Wow.
So that, right.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it wasn't what I was thinking, right? I was thinking more University
More.
in Rice up to, so that's the capital plan, right? And so that's the capital plan. So so is Ramsey County looking at being a part of that overall vision? Is part of that like city?
So we
streets,
worked with,
county?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, what did that look like?
So we worked with a variety of partners. We worked with the city, we've worked with MnDOT, we've worked with Met Transit. And so the project that is gonna be under construction here, like is next week?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Sorry. Real time,
That is
folks. Real
underway,
time.
right?
So the project, so there's 3 stages that are under contract for construction starting yesterday.
Mhm.
The last piece of the puzzle is that university down to John Ireland, which is something we're in design right now with the city.
Mhm.
So all of that is working towards construction, and there's money in the plan for us to do that construction work.
Okay.
So the university and Rice intersection, and then everything south down to
Mhm.
John Ireland, which is that frontage road.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, and just thank you for all these opportunities that are gonna be upcoming EGCI plan, Ramsey County Comp Plan, and just obviously, just to remind you that almost all of us do newsletters, so we can push that out there also. We encourage all of our residents to be on the Public Works website when they're interested, but just to let I like to push out these opportunities for people to be engaged in my newsletters, so just keep us posted as we can help with that.
And I'll just highlight when it comes to Rice Street, the amazing work you all have done just in the lead up to the construction starting yesterday, the amount of community engagement, important stakeholders that you've been reaching out to. And in the midst of the construction, having someone dedicated from Public Works who will be assisting residents, business owners, if they have any questions, if we have any updates throughout this process, that they have someone with the county that they can go to. So really appreciate all your effort there.
Oh, and I appreciate that, Commissioner. Like, we're a learning organization, we learn lessons and we improve over time, and I appreciate that recognition. The other thing I'll say is, I would imagine all of you get feedback on the transportation system on some level
Right.
on a fairly regular basis. And so people are not shy about saying to you and to us, hey, we've got an idea about something you should do. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, but it's all in that generalized feedback. And so we continually get thoughts about what we should do. And so we build that into our engagement too.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I would be remiss, I don't know at what point I could talk about this all the time, but and I know Connie Bernardi's here, but we do have an active living Ramsey communities that you're always all invited to, and any of the public that wants to know how we're working on our active living, which is our All Abilities Transportation Network. We meet quarterly, and the meetings are virtual, and it's such great information. We're getting 40 to 50 people on our calls from all over the county. People can listen in and find out what we're doing. We ask them for feedback on it. It's just a great opportunity for people to weigh in and really participate in a lot of these processes, because this is where we get the people that really can contribute to the process that way. So just put a big shout out for active living Ramsey communities, and Connie Bernardi who's here in the crowd, for the great work that we're doing there.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll continue on since Brian, you nailed the project timeline stuff. One thing to keep in mind is $730 million, which is what we're talking about for this reallocation, sounds like a lot of money. But at the end of 10 years, which is essentially the time frame for using it, it doesn't go as far as you would think. Additionally, knowing the project development timelines that are there, you can be easily 9 years for the development of a single project. You could be a couple of years before it's open. If it's a smaller project, 10 years isn't sufficient to get through all of the projects that we've identified as illustrative projects that we're going to go through, whether in the plan or whether in this PowerPoint. So just some things to keep in mind. And on the 730 million, just as important on that is that it's in today's dollars. So inflation always eats away at that. All the tariffs and the economic situation eat away at that, whether it be through just things costing more or worst case economic downturns that could happen. So that could reduce revenue since it is a sales tax proceed. And then property taxes could go down too, based on things happening on that sector. So just things to keep in mind. We will also continue to look for other sources of federal or funding. We're not just going to solely rely on what the county can pull together. We're going to keep looking at the state to be a partner, same thing from the federal side. And 10 years is also a long time for all of us here at the county. We are changing in a learning organization, as was mentioned. We're going to end up having new priorities and new desires as we go forward. And so this project and process has to be able to reflect that. So those are things just to keep in mind. We came up with a number of countywide investment categories, whether it be corridor improvements, roadways and interchanges, railroad opportunities at the depot and the countywide network, things that can be transformative and innovative, and then an other investments category, which kind of is a catch-all for ones that don't fall nicely into the other four. The map on the left is illustrative. It's meant to show corridor improvements, intersection improvements, which would be the little purple circles. The bluish colored circles are more of the interchanges, and also some of the multimodal improvements from a regional trail standpoint of completing some connections on those as well. It's not showing things like any downtown investments or any Union Depot investments. It's again, just kind of an illustrative approach to give people an idea countywide. And it's a solid theme we keep hammering on this is it's countywide. Corridor improvements, these are those big projects like Rice Street. This would be something like a Wiper Avenue, Maryland Avenue that we've talked about with Purple Line. It could look at things in other parts of the county. County Road 96 can get looked at, Lexington Avenue. So again, multi-mile roadway reconstruction projects. This is tearing it down, replacing utilities, looking at a holistic transformation to identify all the speed issues, all the safety issues, any mobility improvements, and reinforcing the multimodality. Also allows you to put in corridor-wide transit investments and ways to give transit priority within a corridor itself.
Can I ask a simple question about these two photos here, where the bottom one states that you may not be able to have like a turn lane, but you have that center aisle there, and is that really necessary to have that? And do you think that people would utilize it? That we need it.
The center turn lane.
Yeah,
Median.
in the bottom one, that's,
that center grade.
Oh.
that's, yeah, the center.
island.
The island, right.
Yeah.
Do we really need that there? Does it need to be there?
I think it depends on the corridor. Some places it is important. Sometimes it's about a pedestrian refuge.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's about managing access. So it really varies.
Yeah, that was the question. Do people like utilize, do they,
Mhm.
you know, cross and stop?
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
and Go,
Yeah, I can think of a number of corridors where that's pretty vital.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
depends. You know, the wider the corridor, the more important that median can be for a lot of reasons, but certainly as a pedestrian refuge.
Okay.
especially when you have. People think, you know, it's the elderly that need to sort of,
Mhm.
especially a wide street to sort of have a, but when you are a young family with 2 or 3
Yeah.
kids and you're
Groceries.
crossing the street.
Yeah, stroller, yeah.
you could- So it does have a lot of utility, even though I get your point.
Yeah, okay.
Next category, roadways and interchanges, and so this is a picture of County Road J, just as an opportunity to see what a new interchange can look like up there and will look like as we rebuild it, but this is the opportunity for more of a spot improvement instead of a large corridor improvement. It's focused on the specific intersection or interchange. It's looking at a lot of the same things. How do we improve safety? How do we improve mobility? How do we make it more multimodal? How can transit get some prioritization through here? So a lot of this is, I'm thinking of County Road J interchange, doesn't have really good sight lines. It's only got access to and from the north, doesn't, or to and from the south, not to the north. The head bike infrastructure up there is really lacking. So this is an opportunity to address all of those needs with projects. Illustrative projects here again are focusing on interchanges, but we also are looking at a lot of different intersections. Lexington and 96, Hamlin and 96, Como Front and Dale, those are all intersections that are out there that can benefit from this type of analysis to put a nice spot improvement in there that really helps an area have a much better system. Okay.
I just wanna say, oh my God, it's just great. I mean, people that get really frustrated by these roundabouts before they're in, you know, we've said this so many times, like my community just had some roundabouts and people get nervous, but once they're in, they really like them, you know, and once they learn how to use them, and I think we figured out a way to make it safe for pedestrians, because I know that was always a question, and you know, I think it's just, I'm always excited when I see a roundabout now, because the public really appreciates the benefit of them once they learn about them, so.
Just to echo what you just said. Going back to the Lexington Avenue project,
Mhm.
when we started reconstructing that street, everybody in the community was dead set against the roundabout.
Yeah.
By the time we finished the engagement process, the community voted in the roundabout.
Yeah, that's right.
I must have attended more meetings and there was little persuasion in my part. I mean, eventually they got, because they were part of the process and that's what's important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss if I didn't just mention one more thing about this, is in looking at one like Long Lake Road in 694. It's also about reducing barriers to just crossing it and making the community feel more connected. And that's a big benefit here as well, is it everything in as a whole may seem to function okay, or you may not have a high crash rate, whatever. But it can still be such a psychological barrier that these types of projects can reduce that too, to help knit a community back together.
Yeah, there's a couple of great examples, like, if you think about Lexington and 94, maybe the outcome of that looks more like Dale Street. You know, and that we provide a little bit pedestrian improvement in the pedestrian environment. We make a better connectivity for what we know is a lot of different community needs on opposite sides of the freeway. But if you look at like a Snelling and 36, that's a barrier for, you have a residential community on one side and you have Target on the other.
no.
And those folks are crossing what is essentially a freeway. We've been working with MnDOT to think about how do we separate those? So as we rebuild the interchange, we have a safer environment. There's signals instead of those free flow moves so that there's a more controlled flow. And it feels like it's more part of what is part of the people.
That's gonna be a major, that's a major example, right?
Town Manager Beck?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you, Brian, and the team for doing all of this. I do think one next step in the exercise might be to pull in sort of some communication support if we decide to move forward on some of this,
Mhm.
to really create a public messaging around the benefits of kind of
Yeah.
these thematic the paradigm shifts that is less technical, but much more like grounded in human-centered
Mhm.
language. And I think that'll be a big thing that could really help. I mean, you know, being the engineers and folks, you know, you're still doing that type of conversation with the board, but I think there's a different piece about
Yeah.
what kind of community are we building through this investment? And how do we
That's a
want
great-
people to
Mhm.
move in and about and live in a vibrant community? And this is an investment in that vision. So yeah, I think that's a good, you know, should we decide to move forward, I think that's another layer of support we should get your team as well. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. I'll keep rolling right along. The Union Depot and railroad improvements. These are a lot of the thinking long-term. What's the depot going to become? It's definitely a passenger rail hub. It's a premier facility for the Midwest. We want to keep it at that level, not just from a track signal, platform, bus loop, all that physical stuff standpoint. It's the building itself. It's an old building that needs to be maintained. It's an event space. We need to make sure that that is enhanced to keep drawing people to that facility. Borealis mentioned earlier, it's a huge benefit to the depot. There's another train that can show up. There's another train. We need to make sure we're ready when those come. And I think one of the interesting pieces is this is heavily focused on the depot, but we also wanted to call out that there's railroad crossings throughout the county, and they can create different levels of barriers. Some aren't a big deal to get across. They're easy. The gates are there. It's a bridge over the top underneath, however it's set up. Others don't have a pedestrian facility, whether it's just a sidewalk or a trail. Others are just not safe for it because sight lines are bad. We can use money out of this to address that. Put in different lights and gates, put in great separations, add trail facilities, add those ped facilities with just a sidewalk, whatever it may be. So again, reducing that barrier, similar to some of the same thought process on the interchanges, intersections. How do we knit communities back together? Transformative and innovative, this is a large piece, and this is really looking at how do we use transportation investments to support some of the other activities going on, not just within things we're doing as a county, but economic development as a whole. How do we change the built environment? Some of the illustrative projects here are the Spine Road at Rice Creek Crowmans. That's a huge development the county is leading in partnership with Arden Hills. Infrastructure plays a large role in it. This is a way to help fund that infrastructure. A lot of downtown vitality opportunities going on. Park at River's Edge, or the River's Edge development in general, is an opportunity. We've heard a lot of discussion of should we transition the fleet to electric vehicles? And what does that mean? This money could be looked at to initially study that. There's so many tails to it. What do the utilities look like? What does the facility size end up being before you even start to buy the fleet? What does it all mean? This can help with that. We can look at things like mobility hubs. Metro Transit tends to take care of the large ones like Maplewood Mall. We have Union Depot, it's taken care of with a different category. This can look at a lot of the smaller stuff in the neighborhoods where we have good transit connectivity. How do people get that first last mile? Is it a little drop off area? Is it a bike rack? Is it something like that where people just have a spot where they know if I just drop here, I can get where else I need to go, and use other modes to do that. And then one of the exciting pieces here too is a countywide grant program. And the idea behind this is, again, besides spraying a countywide, is let's provide our cities and township, don't want to leave out the township, with an opportunity to get some of their multimodal projects done. They have gaps in their network as well, things that may even connect to our network. Let's use this grant program as a way to give them some money to get that done. It doesn't mean we're paying for it 100%. It's looking at them to put the project together, pull the funding together, and be more of that last dollar in to get them over the hump if that funding gap shows up. It would specifically not be something where they would be using the money to offset their contribution to a county-led project as part of our cost participation policy. It's intended to supplement what they are doing to get more stuff done throughout our community. So I think that's an interesting idea of how to use some of these funds too in an innovative way.
No, this work in particular, I'm really excited about because I'm looking at the work that we're investing in now and how that sets us up for down the road. And especially if we're looking at downtown, how this could really contribute to, you know, if we have bids out for different, you know, companies or groups and what can lure them here to make, you know, downtown St. Paul their home, having such a transit system in place, I think will be crucial in that work. And so really appreciate that work here. And I know that you had told me in our meeting on this topic why you chose Charlotte as your example, but wanted you to share with the rest of the team of why Charlotte is the picture up there.
Yeah, so I did take that picture when I was in Charlotte about a year ago, and I was there for a conference on streetcars, actually, back when we were still looking at streetcars. But I really, really like this because obviously it's downtown Charlotte. This is south of downtown Charlotte. But it's showing light rail on one side. It's in an old railroad right of way, and you'll see the person obviously on the right is running next to light rail because they have a trail that runs parallel with their light rail corridor. And there is just as much activity on that trail and pedestrian facility as there is on the light rail system. Development used to be backing to this corridor. It's flipped to front the corridor, and the overall development on that south side of Charlotte's downtown core is night and day different from just what used to be an industrial area with a lot of single level warehouses is now completely repurposed. There's still some industry in it, but it's lots of mixed use, lots of commercial, a very, very vibrant area. And it is that whole transformative approach of this is a place people want to go. It's a place people want to be seen. It's really exciting.
Great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you, Chair. We know that there are more illustrative projects than we would have resources for from this particular set of funds. And I appreciate that we'll continue to be searching out other intergovernmental funds as well and other opportunities. I mean, dedicating these funds to having more flexibility is just the start, right? I guess my question is, what is the general timeline and process for us to then prioritize some of these illustrative projects? I'm thinking specifically of the Rice Creek Commons and the Spine Road as far as now we're seeing momentum with that project, being able to with more, I mean, holding it loosely, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, but at the same time with some sense of timing for, you know, people who are looking at wanting to develop within the larger area. The Spine Road and its timing and kind of all of that is going to be crucial to their understanding of when they can jump into the project. And I'm just wondering, what is our process and timeline for kind of setting some priorities?
So I'll say a couple things, and if anyone wants to repoint me, please do. But I think Rice Creek Common Spine Road is a little bit unique in that it's been a topic of conversation. I think the county is committed to these funds. You know, we've been saying that wasn't necessarily these funds, but we had funds and we were going to figure out a way to make it work. I think that we can commit to that project going forward. And one of the benefits of the funds that we have is that they don't have time sensitivity to them necessarily. And so we can be somewhat flexible in terms of how we calibrate that construction with how the project is moving forward on the development side.
Excellent, thank you.
And I appreciate that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're
Is it
right.
me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. Obviously, we're always looking for partner funds, which you've already stated, state and federal. So if those would come in, that would be still welcome in these projects. I don't want to give any indication that we can handle any of these, you know, necessarily on our own, that we're always still searching for those dollars. So I appreciate that. And then if you could just talk just a little bit about how you're working with our communities, because I'm super excited to see this, you know, this countywide grant program, because I know all of my cities and all the cities in Ramsey County, you know, want to do projects and, you know, they don't always have the resources, but to work with us on that. And so just talk a little bit about, and I know you are engaged with our Public Works Department. So just for the record to say that, you know, we do value those partnerships of our local, you know, the city of St. Paul and all of our, you know, 17 suburban cities.
Absolutely.
So
No,
you work with the Public Works and let them know that, you know, if there was something they really wanted, we could work with them.
Okay. So I appreciate the point, Commissioner, and we are in regular conversation with our local partners. One of the things that is maybe not necessarily entirely unique about Public Works, but I think is important about Public Works is we all recognize we work together. We all manage different systems, but one system doesn't work without the other. So we are in regular conversation with our city partners. We meet with them. We have regularly scheduled meetings just to talk about specific topics every other month. And this is a topic that came up about, it wasn't specific to this, but it was more about how can we partner so that the county can help offset some of their issues with some of the things that we all want to see get done. And so that's partially what informs this idea about, can we use some of these funds as grants to help cities invest in some of those multimodal connections that we all like to see, but they're a little short on capital. But I think to your point, we work regularly with our partners on this type of thing, and if we would intend for them to help us shape the program the way that we've done with other things.
And I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, if I could just, give a shout out to your department, because you are always trying to get to yes on these, which I really appreciate. Like, our communities have an idea of what they want. Sometimes it can be done, sometimes it can't, but I just appreciate how the department has really transitioned to really, okay, let's get most of what they want, but we maybe can't give them all what they, want, but we can give them a lot of what they want. And we really appreciate that there's not this right, and there's not this, black and white. It's you're looking for that common ground, which I really appreciate. And my communities really appreciate it.
I'll echo that. I got the best job in Minnesota. I work with the best team. They do the best work. They work really hard, and they do work hard on getting to yes.
Which they appreciate. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I just want to amplify that a bit. As you know, CED has the Critical Corridor Program, which oftentimes provides the seed dollars to do corridor planning. Or our Community Development Block Grant, which, as of April 8th, is still here. However, we don't know what the plan for that in the future is, as that's administered through HUD. That also helps to patch some of the network, whether it be trail or pathway segments. So I think suffice to say, the organization does have some experience in terms of building on programs like this. Our city partners will certainly welcome this so that they can do more based off those corridor plans that they've already invested in. They can start to access greater capital to start to actually invest against it. So I think they'll be really excited about this.
Going off on that grant program, I would just ask about do we have a similar program already that the department has experience in? Or are we imagining that this would be run through through the Critical Corridor Program type or a grant process?
I think that has yet to be defined. Yeah.
I think we're still working through it. Like, Critical Corridors has been about planning. I think that the value of this is that it can take it to the next stage of potentially got some capital to invest in some of the things. Like, there have been a handful of projects that gone through the Critical Corridors program and have done a lot of good thinking, like Snelling in 36 is a great example of Critical Corridor started the conversation. There was already a conversation with MnDOT, and so that blend of city, county, and MnDOT all kind of came together to say, like, hold on a second, this looks like a freeway, but it's developing like it's not a freeway, so we should probably think about that, right, guys? And so I think that's that next piece of, I think we can transition to capital, but currently there isn't we do some work, we have it built into our TIP at times, an amount of money for our local partners, but I think that it hasn't been this targeted. Does that make sense?
Public Works staff sits in the review committee for critical corridor proposals currently. So I think that this will be kind of a seamless evolution of that.
And then if I may, what type of projects, or would it go on city roads? Would it go toward city roads, or is it a part of our roads, like the county roads and or state roads, I guess?
So again, this would be off the cuff, and I think it needs some thinking, and I would appreciate thoughts as we develop it. But I'll say, I think our priority would be on our system, but if there were connections that connected to our system, that would be helpful too. And I know like, a lot of our folks work with the cities. There are maps that show lots of different things, and sometimes, you know, some of these funds could potentially be applied that way. I don't know that we'd want to necessarily have it scattershot, but I think we'd want to put some boundaries around how far afield we go. So I don't have a great answer for you today, but we're gonna develop it over time.
Yeah, I would just, like for us to consider is just, you know, making sure that we support projects that are, aligned with what we are envisioning here
For sure.
already.
Yep.
And then also taking into consideration that, you know, I believe my council or on the tab, like, we are working through developing a grant, like a grant process as well too, for the additional money that the state gave to the Met Council. So that's just something for us to consider as we're trying to roll this out. Mhm.
Commissioner Mill?
I just have something that kind of that goes off of Commissioner Zhang's question. Would this grant program then be in lieu of what the cities are to contribute? So,
That's not the intent.
okay, that's not the intent,
But
okay.
it's, in the context of the conversation we've had with our cities, they've been expressing that the counties have resources that the cities didn't get.
Mhm.
And in particular, they're referencing the 2023 legislation, the counties got money and the cities didn't. So we've been in conversation about local share.
Mhm.
Part of the dialogue has been about putting some parameters around that. Where are the places that would be the most helpful to the cities?
Yeah.
When it comes to our work? Are there places where we could potentially emphasize lowering their share?
Mhm.
For maybe specific types of projects we want to encourage? So it's
Why?
incentivizing that work, right? And then, but this is intended to be outside of that,
Okay.
and it was a good conversation to have of like, if we brought capital to the table for some of these things that we all want to do, does that help reduce some of the burden that they have on, let's say, some of the operating?
Okay.
And so that's been the dialogue where they're not directly related, but they're not completely separate either. Does that make
Yep,
sense?
it does. Thank you.
Just want to do a quick time check. We have 15 minutes left and
One slide.
2 slides left, so.
Right.
All right. The final category, other investments, again, catch-all, that don't fit nicely into other categories. So things like those regional trails and greenways, mobility studies, corridor studies, staffing and facilities, thinking of, oh, what comes out of that EV study? How many more staff are we going to need to help deliver all these additional projects? Things like a tree program. We have a lot of dead trees in the right of way. They should be taken down. How do we put trees back? Let's be thoughtful about it. If you're already in a heavily treed area, does that additional tree really make a big difference? Or are you better off to put it in a place that's a heat island? It doesn't have a lot of trees, it has a lot of pavement. So let's be thoughtful about how we approach that. And then just kind of targeted investments for transit, things we're not aware of on that are coming up. Maybe Metro Transit comes up with a project because they get some special funding, and then we're able to make that much better. So that's the thought process there.
I do want to share 2 quick things. One, on the tree program, I love the focus on, you know, leveraging that heat island and understanding where we need to be investing more, especially from an equity standpoint on getting those tree canopies in place. I'd also just remind of, especially as we're thinking of the places where we're removing trees, of having some in understanding that we can share with the public on why we're removing that tree, and, you know, if we're moving X amount versus what the perception that they think that we're moving, like, just so we can really wrap our arms around the communication to the public on the importance and why we're doing that. And then the other thing that I wanted to flag, and this is coming off of reviewing the November board shop. I know that Commissioner Moran mentioned investments towards the Green Line and what that would look like, and wanted to follow up on that, just especially under the last bullet point, if there are have there been additional conversations on what potential support that we could provide to the Green Line that came out of you all's research?
So we are in regular conversation with Met Transit. And university has been a focus that we've been working with Met Transit, with MnDOT, with the city of St. Paul to try to, and this is in consultation with Commissioner Moran, and just trying to show more of a presence. And that each of the agencies is trying to be more present, to try to demonstrate to the community that there are people that are out there trying to make it better, cleaning up more with some more frequency. In terms of the investments, say in the, let's call it flat platform and security, which is, I think, where you were going, Commissioner. I think our role has shifted a little bit in terms of prior to 2023, the county had a role in paying for some of the operating costs. Post 2023, we do not. And so now it's more of an outsider advisory role of saying, here are things we see. We want to see you do better. How can we support that? Or what kinds of things can we do? And so I think we're doing things on the operating side. And we continue to share perspectives with Transit. We had a meeting with them on Monday morning to talk about a number of things related to what's kind of the ongoing vision for how some of the things can be better. So it's a little unique, but we continue to be in partnership with Transit and do whatever we can to help them.
Yeah, I do think an ongoing conversation, Mr. Chair, with working with Deputy County Manager Reyes, like she's doing a lot around Safe and Strong University Avenue initiative. And I wonder if there's some opportunity, like not from like the, you know, the management of the platform or even the operations and that type of thing, that there's a, again, I always go back to, you know, the theme here for me today has been like the people component. There is a people component of what's happening along university that aligns well with more connected communities, which is, I think, a theme here using transit. So I do think that might be a different group of people than you are dealing with at Met Transit. So let's make sure we have that group connected, and maybe like, I liked what you were saying. It's basically enhancing what maybe Met Transit is already doing, but it's coming from a completely different lens of public, little bit of, I would say less even about public safety, because it's really clear like which police or whatever is in charge of some, well, it's a little mucky, but there's people in that space. But I think where we're really interested is the investment in like making sure it's a place where community feels like transit is approachable there and usable. So anyway, but I think there's a connection there.
Yep.
And we can keep working with Commissioner Moran, and there's some groups that are already working through, especially John Choi's office as well, through the violence reduction leadership group. So that's where those reports are coming through. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Jean?
One of my other questions that I have is, could this fund be used towards, you know, supporting, the community engagement and or outreach to businesses? And or like, what is kind of the plan for our more intensive projects where it will be like road reconstruction? Will there be like a business liaison person that does the engagement, and is it funded through these sources, or is it through our general levy?
I think it could be a mix of funding, Commissioner, and I appreciate you raising the question. I think I would say that's a lesson we've learned in public works, is that connectivity to the business community, especially with a large scale project, is super important. And I will say that it's probably gonna vary, but I think we would expect major projects like a Rice Street would look similar, that we'd have an increased staffing level, we'd have an increased communication presence, we would be more present in the community than in other spaces. And you know, whether it's these funds or others, we're gonna commit to that.
Yeah, I would say, that's good to hear, but that's also like just the pushback that we always hear from like these big road reconstruction projects. Especially like, for example, Purple Line Riverview, like we've all heard that about just the impact to the businesses. And as our infrastructure is aging, that we will have to do more road reconstruction down the line.
Absolutely, but it's not lost on us, and I think that we've learned that from a variety of projects that no one really likes to see us coming. I'll be perfectly frank, including my relatives, but it's important. And, you know, the degree to which we can hear those concerns and build it into the project is the measure of our success for sure. But I think, like I said, we benefited from a really amazing group of people who do continue to learn and do continue to see where we can improve. And are really connected to making sure that we're not overly impacting our residents too. So I think just a few thoughts. We talked a lot about a lot of these, but I'll just emphasize a couple of pieces here. This is about prioritizing all abilities and expanding the degree to which we can improve those facilities. This is about broadening the geography to which we can enhance the multiple modes. And really, in that vein, the more modes, the more access that people have to different options, the more affordable Ramsey County is for its residents and the more ability that they have to get to the places that they need to get to. Our county system, as we've talked to this board on a number of fronts, continues to be a safety issue. And so safety is going to be preeminent in how we look at things. And so we're going to work hard to continue to transition the system to a more safe environment. You've seen a lot of 4-to-3 conversions, which cut the crash rate in half. We're going to continue to make improvements in the system with that in mind. And then lastly, I can't emphasize enough that allocating these funds is going to profoundly change the degree to which the transportation system can really help our residents.
Sure, I'll just run through this quick. So assuming that we're in a good spot to keep moving forward on this, we'll incorporate feedback from today. The next steps in our process of upcoming board meetings, we have 5 essential things that need to be addressed. I don't think it's 5 separate meetings, but it is multiple meetings. We would look to come back to you in May with an approval of the 2050 All Abilities Transportation Plan after the public engagement piece is done. We'd be able to present to you on what it is, exactly the details of it. This piece, which is the Transit and Transportation Investment Plan, to say, yep, these are the 2 foundational documents for how we're going to spend this money. We would then have to have a subsequent meeting, a public hearing, where we would call out specific projects as required by state statute for use of the local option sales tax money. That meeting, after the public hearing was done, we'd have a meeting the following week where we would approve a resolution as a board on the use of the sales tax money. So that would lay out the ability to use that sales tax money going forward on those projects. Ultimately, that all gets rolled into the 2025 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program, which will be brought back to you. And one thing just to keep in mind, because of all the changes going on with this, you won't see a lot of these projects showing up into the 25 to 29 tip. It's just, you're going to start to really see them show up starting in that 26 to 30 tip. That's just how things are going to shake out as it goes forward. So I know we're basically at time, so I'll stop there and.
Yeah, any final questions?
Kelly has it.
Do you have dates for the public hearings and already set? Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
We're hoping to get through them by early June. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's,
So we're hoping that these are going to land in short succession.
Yep.
okay. I thought that was before it comes to the board in May, but it's after.
May is just the all abilities.
Okay, there you go. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
And just, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for all this work. Just to confirm, these amounts that you've given us at the top of these categories, they're ballparks. It's kind of what we're thinking about, and as we go along, it's not set in stone.
Those are all going to go to Roseville.
Yeah, well, that's what I was hoping. I didn't say it. I want
Also,
to make sure that's what was happening.
those numbers total more than the 730 million.
Yeah,
Well, They're
okay, right.
significantly
Oh,
more than
okay,
that
yeah, you're
to
right.
show
If I
that
had
the
done
need
that-
goes
If I
beyond.
would have done that, it would have been clearer.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well,
You'll see us rolling priorities.
Yeah, it'll be kind of in fluid. It'll be fluid.
awesome.
Okay.
Well, thanks again for presenting. Before we wrap up, just a couple of takeaways I want to make sure for you all as you go back and continue to work on this plan that came from our group today. Of course, the community piece continue to be important, I think, to all of us. Making sure we're keeping up with the level and the process of community engagement that you all are currently doing. I know that it's been mentioned before, if we can get a breakdown of what each of the scoring metrics mean, just so we can get a better sense of what goes into that. Keeping in mind how much the county can fill the gap when other partners may be experiencing some greater impact of federal funding and the uncertainty behind that. And of course, keeping in mind of the communications component of this and how we're going to create public messaging that really puts the focus around human safety, community-centered for the work that's ahead of us. And then, of course, the last piece that I heard from the group is the continued support for dedicated staff as we're building out some of these larger projects and make sure that folks in the community are understanding what's happening, getting updates, and feel like they are being kept in the loop on the process. So any other questions or thoughts from folks? Thank you again.
Thank you so much for your support, folks. Really
Really
appreciate
good.
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
Oh, there's